So for both parties, taking this policy on board significantly improves their reach across the electorate. For the Conservatives, it brings them close to a majority. For Labour, it gives them a clear majority on the current numbers. So my name is James Johnson. I'm a pollster. I run the polling firm JR Partners. Before that, I was the chief pollster to Theresa May while she was Prime Minister in Number 10. If you had to get me to tell you which two taxes were the most unpopular with the country as a whole, they would be stamp duty and they would be council tax. People's views on council tax in the polling were pretty negative. They don't feel that it's a fair tax, and as we've seen in other polling, people also feel that it's one that they'd like to see change the most. And the main reason for that is basically a sense that it doesn't feel fair. It doesn't feel like people are paying the amount that they should. If you're in a very high value house, your home is still being valued on measures on how it was 30 years ago. Whereas if you're in a lower value house, you're perhaps paying a little bit more than you would if it was actually done proportionally based on the value of your property. They also see it as very geographically different. If you live in Westminster in London, compared to if you live down the road in another local authority, you're paying very different levels of council tax. But you may be getting just the same amount of services, or even possibly a worse level of services if you're paying more. So proportional property tax is a flat rate tax of 0.48% on homes across the country. And basically the idea of fairer share is that people pay a fairer share, because at the moment those council tax rates are currently priced on 1990 levels. So the proportional property tax tries and brings that evenly depending on the value of a home, rather than these rates that were made quite some time ago. Obviously, one of the things that proportional property tax does is replace stamp duty as well, so we also see that driving high levels of support. When we polled the proportional property tax, we firstly asked about it with not much information at all, just a very simple explanation, and that received support of around 2 to 1 in the public, which is obviously strong support for a policy. When we added in all of the information about the proportional property tax, and we also gave the ability for people to see what the impact would have been on their home's value, that goes up to 52% in support and only 17% against. Now, I've done a lot of these polls on policies, both at Number 10 and in the past and with other clients, and majority support for a policy is quite a significant margin. It's quite rare to get policies that get over 50% support. So clearly proportional property tax does excite the public at large. People in the north, that support goes from around 3 to 1 to 9 to 1. So only 7% of people oppose it in the north, which is really strong. That doesn't mean, however, that in the south and places with higher property prices that the proportional property tax is opposed. We actually found across all of the constituencies in the country, there is net support for the proportional property tax. Think about that. If you're an MP going into the election next year, in your constituency, it's guaranteed that this is a popular policy. And that's obviously a pretty striking finding. Now, when we look at it from the perspective of the main parties, so would the Labour Party, would the Conservative Party benefit from having this tax in our manifesto? We asked voters how they would vote in that situation compared to if it wasn't in their manifesto. When we did this polling, Labour had a small majority, Conservatives were behind Labour in terms of seats. If the Conservatives adopted the proportional property tax at an election, we forecast in our numbers that they would go from being behind Labour to within reach of a majority. If Labour adopted the proportional property tax at an election, we forecast that they would have a very clear majority and that they would make significant inroads in Scotland, where they're currently doing relatively badly. So there is a huge electoral gift here for either party if they were to take it on. There's two things going on here that explain the popularity of the proportional property tax across the country. One is a pretty simple one, which is it gives me more money in my pocket. Facing a cost of living crisis, people feeling the squeeze, for a lot of people this would take a lot of money off of their council tax bill and save them a lot. So that is a real attraction for a lot of people, especially in those areas where homes are lower value, so in the North and the Midlands, which also overlaps significantly with the key seats that are at play at the next election. This election is going to be about the swing seats in the North and the Midlands, the red wall as it gets called. There's a second thing though, because I don't think with the public it is always just about money and just about cash. It's also about fairness. People who will be more affluent will be paying more, and people who are less affluent will be paying less. And that gets at an instinct to the British public. That sense of paying the fair share, paying what people should, whether it's on the NHS, whether it's on defence, whether it's on tax. If a policy can strike at the heart of that instinct of the British public, fairness, then it polls very, very well indeed. They save money, but they also think it's fair and the right thing to do. And that's the two things together that build up the electoral case for removing stamp duty, but also replacing it with a proportional property tax. If this comes in, if you're the public, I think you're punching the air. If you're a political party and you're the ones bringing it in, I think you're also punching the air. If you're the party who got left behind and didn't put it in the manifesto, I think you're the one who's perhaps looking a little bit downcast at the next election.